Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian.
And I'm Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share our thoughts and perspectives on marriage.
We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. Now, let's get right into the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the pod. We got a special guest for you. I'll say a longtime friend of mine now. And I am very excited to have this conversation with him because it's going to be a little bit of a different perspective from what you typically hear from us.
Yeah, and we just always encourage you as you rock with us, please hit us up on all of our socials, searching Marriage is Tougher. You can also hit us on our website, marriageistoffer.com, if you would like to be a guest, have any questions that you want to ask us, or just want to reach out. Again, please, on all of your podcast platforms, like, rate, subscribe, and you can even search us over on YouTube if you want to see our pretty faces. Again, new listeners, welcome. If you've been rocking with us for a while, we appreciate the love. So let's get right into the show.
Yeah, we're going to rip this Band-Aid right off. I am pleased to welcome my friend Paul Montalvo. And we're just going to get right into these questions. Let us know, who is Paul?
Let's start out with see, look at that. My name is Paul Montalvo, as you stated. Appreciate you guys first for thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
I am a 43-year-old man from Yonkers, New York. Moved into Pennsylvania some time ago, roughly about 12 years ago at this point. And I have lived and learned in Pennsylvania. 43-year-old podcaster, fellow podcasters. Check out the Paul and Pals podcast wherever they are available. Appreciate the plug, gentlemen. And other than that, just living life, trying to get through the muckety muck of it all. So hopefully you guys can help me figure out this part of it, because I come from a perspective that I don't know. I may have to apologize to the audience members right now for what you guys are about to hear.
Well, no, we appreciate that for sure. Before we get too deep into your perspective, which we're actually going to, of course, what was some of your examples of marriage, either growing up or right now?
Unfortunately, mostly bad. The good, there's good. Like, let me first start off by saying there's exceptions to everything. And my good example, fortunately for me, has been my family, my mother, my father. It's been a rough patch. You know, we've all seen our loved ones have arguments, they have disagreements. The boiling point was when they split up for some time, and I had to live in Puerto Rico for 3-4 months. Felt like a year, but I was super young, so it ended up being about 3 or 4 months. Since then, they have been, to me, the definition of a marriage. Good, bad times, but it's just always stuck through it. Split up time apart, they were always in contact, and they reconciled and came back. But other than that, Brian, you're a good example of a marriage. Other than that, it's been an example of people that just, whether it's times changing, people's changing, perspectives changing, it's just every example I see has just been one of just a negative one. Makes you go, why do I want to do this?
Yeah, that's good, man. I like to hear everyone's perspective on marriage, and I like to hear what their examples of marriage are. What I'm learning, the more and more that I talk about this, it's becoming a daily thing, even though we only record once a week. The thing I'm learning is it matters, but only to a certain extent, right? Because each person is going to be different, right? You can, let's say, marry someone who is similar to your mother, but that person is still going to be an individual. and your relationship is still going to be different and have different challenges than the example that you saw, right? So it's funny to me how going into this podcast, I thought that I would put more weight on what someone's example of marriage is, and I still want to collect that data. Um, but I'm finding that as we progress in our relationships, we still have so much more to learn, right? As we have to experience these things ourselves. And more or less, it's just it's just funny to me how I feel like I was kind of wrong on that assumption.
When we learn, and I'm putting this in excuse me, I'm putting this in a relationship. When you learn, you grow. When you grow, unfortunately, sometimes that means you end up growing apart from somebody. It's part of learning. You can love somebody to death, but the course of time will dictate where you guys are going to be at. And you guys could be the most coupley of couples ever. But over the course of time, perspective changes, life changes, events happen, and you end up finding yourself from going parallel to just one person starting to veer off, or both. And that's a dangerous ground to touch on when it's in marriage. If it's amicable and both people realize, you know what, life has changed us and we're not the same people that we were when we met. If it's amicable, cool. You know, that's a perspective that you can rock with. Okay, life has caused this to happen. But when it's not amicable and one or both person have now gone the petty route, the potential blowback on that is also one of those things I see that makes it, is it worth it?
Paul, you want to touch on that?
No, I mean, I'm just rocking with what you're saying. It's the thing is, I I just it's a tough thing to hear, right? Because I where what me and my wife do is we're marriage coaches, right? So we try to set up people before they're even, ideally we like to get them in the dating phase when they're just thinking about we might get married, right? So that you can just Paul, just to give you a little background, just so that we're talking about more of those serious questions before you're already locked in, engaged with the ring, kind of already put some money down somewhere, and like you can't back out, right? You feel like you can't back out. So we try to dive in to those questions that are deeper so that you can have those conversations and really see where you stand on all those things. Obviously, at that time, like wherever that is, we change over time. Um, but I think a lot of people don't do that type of work before they're even engaged, or um, while they're dating, to know like, should I even keep rocking with this person? If obviously dating is, if their purpose is to get married, right? If you're just dating out there to have fun, that doesn't matter. Um, because if sometimes those you get some revelations within your marriage once you're in and you haven't hit those serious topics, and you're like, whoa, we are so opposite on this, and we are both, you know, firm in the ground on our stance, like we're not changing. And then that's when um it can get rough and there's a veer off. And yeah, that petty route is, like you said, it's sad to see. You'll never want to see that, right? Especially if you've witnessed it or if you've experienced it yourself. Like, that's not what it's about. And you don't want that to ever happen. And I could see why you would say, is it worth it? But if you've seen more marriages fall that way than stay together, then you don't really have a perspective on like, it's probably going to end the way that I generally see it. So, right, is it worth it?
Yeah.
So I feel that perspective.
And to your credit, I didn't know that's what you did. you and your wife. So to your credit, you actually give a service out to try to help avoid those pitfalls. Because like you said, nobody takes the time. And I feel like that's a lost art of being in a relationship. Excuse me. I feel like that's a lost art of being in a relationship is the taking the time to get to know each other. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's social media. I don't know if it's technology. I don't know if where people all of a sudden took this turn that more times than not, everybody feels they're entitled now and they just deserve the instant gratification of something. But nobody takes that time to grow together, to build, to figure it out, and to stick around. Hard times are, it's inevitable. The problems that are going to come in life, nobody goes through this thing called life 100% from beginning to end. Like, oh, this was a great experience all the way through. I highly recommend this. Like, it more times than not, you go through a struggle than good times. Good times are great and they make great memories, but that's not what makes a person, it's not what defines a person. So when you end up going through, it's hard enough to go through hard times by yourself. When you then add the equation of a significant other, like now you're going through hard times, and it can be even harder if you guys are on the same page or you guys are looking for two different things. So going back to it, like you take care of that legwork. Like that's a beautiful thing that what you're doing, because people don't do that nowadays, and you can see the end result of that. Bill Burr has a the comedian Bill Burr has a comedy. He has a joke. And granted, it was a joke before he got married, and he's happily married now and has a kid. But he did have a joke that, why would I want to get married? It's the divorce rate's 50%. If you go skydiving and they go, hey, you got a 50% chance of the parachute not opening up, you're not jumping.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so real. That is hilarious. Um, no, that's good. I did want to, so let me ask you this, just a different perspective. It just popped in my head, right? So as a culture, and like you said, I don't know if it's social media or whatever, maybe it's just we have felt more entitled as our generations have come. But I was thinking about there's not really mentorship or like people either opening up or being open to talk to, right, about marriage. Like I was thinking about, one of the reasons why we have this podcast, because we don't, there's not like a open community where we could just be like, man, like we're married or we're thinking about marriage, and like we're not walking with people. I think like we have culturally in the past where it's more community. So you may hear a conversation about, you may hear, married men talking about stuff that is hard and how they got through. And same thing for the women. They may be in a place where they're just gathering and marriage comes up, or like hard times, someone's going through hard times and they're explaining how they're getting through it, and kind of in a group setting, maybe having people give suggestions, or even people taking other people just naturally under their wing to just walk through life. And in that, if the person's married, you can see the inner workings of a marriage, not just the social media highlights or whatever celebrities are saying is what a marriage should be. So I was just thinking, what about what's your take on that? Do you see any of that with your family or anyone close to, or
I feel like that's a problem life-wide. Out of marriage and just talking about life, I have a little nephew, and I always tell him, like, I'm gonna give you my downfalls. I'm gonna give you my losses so you avoid those pitfalls when you can. Excuse me. I think the issue that we face is older people don't want to be bothered by younger generations because these young kids think they know everything, so I'm not telling them anything. And you have the younger generation that comes in and goes, I know everything. Why do I need to hear from this person that's been through it all? And therein lies a rub. I feel, especially the older I get, it's, I don't want to call it an obligation, but I feel like it's almost my duty as somebody who has, and I'm not an 80-year-old man that's walked this earth that long, but I've had life experience. I feel like it's in my best interest for the people that I love around me to give them my little anecdotes of life and my experiences, my highs and my lows, to help them not have to go the same route I went through, to help their life, even if it's just a little bit better, to help them out. Somewhere along that line, nobody wants to hear it. Now, I'm going to use my sister as an example. I love my sister. I hold family more dearly to me than anything on this earth. My mother, my father, my sister, my nephew, my cousins, aunts, you name it, family means the world to me. My sister, she had her first kid, my nephew, and she's going through the struggles of raising a baby. This was a long time ago. He's a grown ass little knucklehead now. Oh, pardon. Sorry. Um, so here she is holding this kid. Kid's getting older, causing headaches. Well, what do I do? What do I do? I'm frustrated. Here comes her parents who gave birth and raised this child, saying, well, you should try this, you should try this. And quickly her response is, don't tell me how to raise my kid. It's like, yo, that's your first one. Talk, you're coming from the person that gave birth to you and helped raise you, that I think I'm a decent human being. I think she's a decent human being. Why would you not at least heed the advice? You don't have to follow it, but at least hear it. That's what I think the misses happen, is you don't want to take advice from somebody that's been through it before and may have a perspective that, at least it's a perspective. You're new to this. And if you're new to this, why would you not at least hear something when it comes to relationships and marriage and just in life in general? I think that's where we're failing. And the communication is key. But I think nobody wants to communicate anymore.
That's Paul Montalvo, y'all. We're done.
Pick up this mic and drop it.
I agree with a lot of what you said, but then I would also challenge some of it as well. I think that, well, I'm going to go a couple different ways, so hang in here with me for a minute.
Challenge is a good thing, man.
I think that there are a lot of people in this world who have a lot of knowledge, right? They've been through a lot of things. And I see a couple different ways that typically goes. One, them being willing to share and go out of their way to share, like you do with your, you said your nephew, right?
Yes, yes.
And the other end of that is younger people need to seek that information, right? We talk about money quite a bit. Wealthy people typically don't just go out of their way to share their wealth information, but if you're willing to ask and show that you're interested and want to put in some work to learn, that's how they begin to share, in my experience. Right. I think also young kids tend to put too much weight into specific things or specific results they may have seen from their elders. Right. So let's say, well, I'll just use myself as an example. I came up in a single parent home, right? I knew that in my adult life, I didn't want to live with the same result that my mother uh, faced. But that doesn't mean that there aren't parts of her life that she did well. Right. So I can't say, like, oh, well, that was her result. So now I got to throw out everything she did and do everything different. Right. I can't listen to any of her advice because that was her result. So I think if we can teach young kids that, hey, reflect on what were the good things that you saw and hold on to those and maybe change just a little bit of some of the negative things depending on how extreme they were. Sometimes a small change can provide a wildly different result, right? If you go back to a ship, you change it just 2 degrees in direction and, let it go for how many ever nautical miles, right? Your original endpoint and the existing endpoint could be, a day's travel apart. So I think that's just something that I wanted to put out there because it's something that was been on my mind. I was in a Clubhouse chat room yesterday, and they were talking about how a lot of people believe that we were sold a fairy tale by social media, right? That we're supposed to have this happy ending and all this, and like it's unattainable is basically what they were saying. And I challenged people in that room. I said, "Give me a Disney movie where you actually saw the end." Everybody kept using this happy ending, right? But all you really see is typically them going up to the point of getting married, and then they say they lived happily ever after, right? You don't see any of the work that they put in. You don't see, the things that they had to learn, the challenges that they had to go through. You don't see their successes. So I can understand the perspective, and I can really kind of understand why people put so much stock into their wedding day, because the whole time as a child, you are kind of just chasing that if your example is what you're getting from Disney, right? Is like, oh, I just got to get to that day and then everything will be fine after that. Right. But yeah, man, those are my thoughts on that.
So I 100% agree with you, and a lot was said there. So you could take examples from situations that, again, using a single family. Okay, it was a single family. Maybe she didn't do things right in certain situations. Those are your examples.
Mm,
You can be in a relate. You could have you come from a alcoholic, abusive background. Not mine, but just as an example, you had a alcoholic father. Okay, that's your example of how not to be. So everything is an example. It's just a matter of how you're going to take it. And again, everything is one. Yes, the wealthy does not want to, more times than not, share their how to do it. Partially because partially because they feel like it's a waste of time, partially because people don't want to hear it. Again, we end up missing each other when it comes to the communication part. And the funny thing is, communication is the answer to everything, whether it's work related, family related, job related, marriage, you name it. Anything that's a relationship is one communication away from being resolved, or at least have a better understanding of the situation you're in. But people fear the conversation. People don't want to hear. It's like it's probably blasphemy for saying it on a marriage show, but my boy Patrice O'Neal, who is probably anti all things relationships to a certain extent, but he says it best. Medicine cures all, but nobody wants to take it because it tastes bad. The conversation, usually a real conversation, has to deal with taking medicine. It'll make you feel better in the long run, but nobody wants to take it because that taste is a bad taste. But again, that's the catch-22. You need to taste the bad to get better. And we live in a generation, or maybe we always have, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, man. I have none of the answers to the truth. I'm just trying to navigate through the thing called life. You have to have, going back to your happily ending ever, whatever. The happy ending. Struggles there. Like nobody goes through this thing saying, oh man, that was 100% happiness right there. Marriage, life, job, bills, significant other in just a regular relationship, raising a child, life in general is struggle. People need to get over this this almost lie that was told of this Disney happy ending, because they hold their head on that, and then when the bad times come, they don't know how to handle the situation because, oh my God, it wasn't supposed to be like this.
Mhm.
If you have the understanding of it, of no, this is not what this is. This is, again, it's all perspective. So when the bad times do come, is it a end all be all, the worst thing that's ever happened, or is it a time that we can reflect and grow?
Yeah, and I think that was my point. Like we don't see what the end is. So if you can't have that experience, then you can't necessarily say you were um, sold a falsity, because what what people are seeing as the end is the act of getting married, not the marriage, right? But I want to kind of focus back into what our original topic was, man. Obviously, by this point, people can tell that you're a single man. Are you looking for a relationship?
Currently, no.
Currently, no. Okay.
Currently, no. Currently focusing on myself to better myself. Excuse me.
Okay. So, no, right now, um, I know I've heard you speak about past relationships. Once you get yourself to a point where you find that is acceptable, do you see yourself then looking for a relationship?
I would like to.
Okay.
Who doesn't want to be with somebody that is going to fill that void?
Hmm.
We all want that. No matter what I say, that's not me being a hypocrite. It's just like I said, I can meet somebody today that's going to change my perspective on everything. We all want that certain level of happiness. That person that can complete you to a certain extent. That person that will take things on with you and be there, that ride or die person.
Hmm.
I am the oddball here because my experiences and the things I've been through, while not as traumatic as what some people have gone through, you can hear stories of people that have gone through holy crap moments in relationships. And I'm not saying I've been through that, but I know I've been through what I've been through. And the realist in me, that's the thing. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a nihilist. I'm not any of those is other than a realist. And that might be to a detriment because I've always been raised and grown and just have learned to avoid. If you touch the stove, you probably don't want to touch it again. And I've touched the stove like 3-4 times when it comes to relationships. And I'm just at the point that's like, I don't know if I want to touch it again. I don't know what I don't. So
See, now I would argue you just have to learn how to touch the stove.
you might be right. You might be right. I feel like I'm at a point that as much as I want to open up to somebody, I don't know if I'm going to allow myself to open up to somebody. And that's going to cost me. And I realize that. Like, I realize that. My last relationship that I was navigating into, of all the relationships that have slapped me in the face. The one good one I found, I ended up costing it because my BS, and at that point was super negative in my train of thought, cost me the relationship, which further made me go, why do I want to do this? So I think I need your coaching, man.
Man, yeah, I like what you've been saying throughout. It's all about perspective. And to the stove analogy, right? Like, we understand once you learn about the stove and how to navigate the stove, you realize you don't put your hand on the stove. You put a pot on the stove, right? And to not burn whatever you're cooking, you put oil or butter on it before you do it, right? So there's just this level of figuring out how to navigate that space. And I think obviously you're saying I'm taking time for myself right now. You're in that, you're kind of learning, you know, how to be better in yourself. And then if you so choose, you bring that better self to that next relationship. So I I guess for me, I'm interested in hearing your perspective on if you were, or whenever that is, and you may start dating, is that just strictly for dating, or would that be to maybe even consider marriage like down the road? Or it's just, if I'm dating someone, I'm gonna just stay in the dating because I've seen what's out there?
I My thing with marriage is this, to me, and again, this is just my disclaimer. This is just me. I feel that marriage is outdated and almost archaic in fashion. I feel the tradition of marriage, and it goes back to, I don't know if it's technology, I don't know, the culture has changed. People's perspective has changed. It's not about building anymore. It's not about love. Again, exceptions to every rule. But when you do have a divorce rate that's 50%, there's something there. So maybe this thing called marriage isn't isn't up to date. I don't know what the end. I don't know if it's the. I don't know what the end result should be. Everybody should just acknowledge they're together. I'll call you my husband. You call me your wife, and we just continue living this thing. Because there's one thing I've noticed, that marriage brings problems to, like, you're automatically depending on, I need this wedding. I need this extravaganza to celebrate this thing. Bang, you're already in debt, which now brings negativity to the relationship. There's things that, like I say, I told Hooks this on my podcast when he was kind enough to come by. I think that relationships end up being the cause of the downfall of relationships. Meaning all the things that people think what a relationship is that they now have to do because they're in a relationship ends up being obstacles and potholes in the relationship. Oh, we're together, which means now, instead of just being as cool as we were and just going through the daily things that made us happy, well, we're this now. So now we have to do this. Oh, we're married now. So now we have to do this. And I feel like those things, if they're both agreed upon, cool. But if that's now coming from one side of it, oh, well, we're married now. So now you should act this way. Oh, you're married now. So we can't do the thing that we did that made us happy for some reason. I feel like those are the things that make it an outdated thing. Plus, there's so many different venues in life now, there's so many different ways to meet people. It's not like it was back in the day. That's where the archaic part comes in. Marriage back in the day is a whole different thing than what it should be today. I don't have the answer to what it is, but I feel like it's an outdated, archaic thing.
I hear what you're saying. Now, my problem with it is that obviously you're speaking to two people who work very hard on their marriages, right? And I'm probably going to take us back to the stove, but you know, we did speak about it already. We need to get prepared for marriage, and it's those who don't that will inevitably run into more difficult struggles than those who have laid that foundation, right? If we were talking about don't touch the stove, right? But the argument was, well, you just need to know how, right? You have to touch the stove to open the door to put something in the oven, right? You have to be able to touch the stove to turn the knobs to either turn down or raise the flame, right? And then when your problems arise, right? Let's say, God forbid, there's a grease fire. You have to know not to throw water on it, right? So there's this element like my co-host Paul here said that you need to know how to navigate your problems to get to a solution. And I've been there before where I didn't know how to navigate them. And I've talked about on this podcast how I used to just shut down and not communicate. So kudos to you for knowing that communication is one of the best things you can do. But it's that preparedness that most people don't explore, which I tend to believe is why our divorce rate is so high. Second to that, I think there's too many people who enter into their marriage without a sense of purpose, right? Um, it's like, oh, well, this is just the next stage of life. I see all my friends getting married. Now I feel like I'm late, right? Oh, all my friends have jobs. They went to college, they get these jobs and all that. And, I didn't find a career yet, so I'm late. I gotta, try to play catch up. And that's what I think gets a lot of people into trouble. I'll let Paul speak on it a little bit more, but those are my top two things where I think people struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hits it, and I'll probably just keep saying it because that it's ringing true, but it is perspective, right? If you one of the things as you talk to people, it's all about people aren't really upset with the outcomes that they face. They're upset that the expectations of the outcomes weren't met, right? So if you don't expect something and you face it, then you're able to see it in more of a general light. But if you have expected something and then it doesn't happen, now you have feelings of disappointment, doubt, grief that it didn't happen, all these things that can come up. So a lot of times, just like you were saying, Paul, is we have these expectations of what should be now that we're married. When if you talk through it with someone that's like, no, just live your life, like do the things that you're strong at. She can do the things that she's strong at, and those things that you like to do, figure out how to carve the time out, figure out how to allot time together so you get that time, but also that time apart so you keep growing, right? And if you talk to someone that's had that experience and can walk you through it, then it eliminates those false expectations that you may have, or those things that you think you should have because you're now married. And just like you said with your sister, as far as like being a new parent, be open to hear or see stuff that's worked. And a lot of times we aren't. Um, I think one thing now that we've discovered is that therapy is real and it helps people, right? There's trauma. Everyone goes through some level of trauma. And I think to piggyback off what Brian said and not use the same two things, but I think a lot of us haven't dealt with our own trauma or our own baggage before we get married. So we carry that into a marriage. Now you have two people with all this luggage and there's no place to put it but in this one room that we're hanging out. So we have to navigate around these stacks and stacks of luggage that we're bringing in, and that's not fun. So um, when people don't face what they're dealing with head on, they may need therapy, they may need medication, you know, but then you bring that to marriage. Like, example, say you marry someone and you move relatively quick, and you find out they're bipolar and they're not taking medication. Like how do you navigate that marriage when the highs and lows are so drastic and they're so different? But I've seen a couple relationships close to me struggling with that, and the person is refusing to take medication, been diagnosed, refuses to take the medication. So like there are probably many people that haven't even been diagnosed and they've been through that, and that is obviously a part of the at some point you're going to amicably be like, we can't do this anymore because it's just too rough. But I use that as an extreme example, but there's a lot of things that people bring that if they have taken care of before they got married, then they wouldn't bring that in, and then it wouldn't have to walk out of and wave the right flag as it as well.
That's one of the things that make this, it's hard, man. A regular relationship is hard. When you add marriage to it, that's why the ones that are doing it, like yourself and Brian, I applaud that. Like, this is not me just stomping all over marriage. This is, again, from my perspective. So please bear with me because it's just where I come from. Other people like yourselves, you make it happen. It's a hard thing, man. Life is hard. Being single is hard. In a relationship is hard. Marriage is just extra on top of that. It's all hard. So it's rough waters to navigate, but again, I feel like that's a thing that people don't want to navigate. It's it's easier to quit. It's easier to just go, this isn't working. A year in, we made this vow for life, and 6 months in, I'm finding these things about you that, I don't really like. So no, this is not what it is. Or if we're gonna stick together, I'm now gonna cheat, or this, because people don't want to. Okay, we have to grind this one out now. We need to communicate. Maybe we need therapy. Maybe we need to work on this. But people don't want to work on things anymore. People either want instant gratification or to be done with it. Gone is the middle part of figuring it out, which is what older generations had to do. There was no social media. There was no, we're going to go on POF and I'm going to find another person and we're going to try again. Like, no, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to try to figure this out. And that doesn't exist anymore. And plus, when you also add, just I guess it's out the blue, but when you also add that if it doesn't work out, the consequences of marriage not working out, the negatives more times than not land on the guy, whether it's financially, if you have kids, that part of it all, it favors the woman more, justifiably or not. And I feel like there's a lot of pitfalls to it. If you could make it last, it's a beautiful thing. If you could make your marriage last, there's probably nothing better in the world to waking up to somebody that you actually love and care about, and your guys are navigating this thing called life together and making it happen. There's probably nothing better on this planet. If it doesn't go right, the potential downfall from it, to me, I don't know if you're weighing the pros and cons of it all. I don't know. I don't know. Goes back to your question, would I get married? I don't know.
I feel like that's a step toward progress. If you were wanting to, or had an idea that you may want to someday be married in the back of your head somewhere, right? Because I feel like when we went into this, your stance was nah, definitely not. But I'm also keeping in mind who our audience is, right? Typically, someone who stumbles upon this podcast isn't gonna be the type of person who's like, yeah, I'm just not getting married. Right? It's just like not what we're putting out there. So I understand that. And I'm also not gonna sit here and say marriage is for everybody. Everybody should get married. Because, just by what we said today in this recording, right? If you don't prepare for marriage, then marriage isn't for you, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that to somebody else, right?
Right.
There's just no sense in dragging somebody else down. But you look like you wanted to make a point. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that I leave all doors open. I'm not closed-minded enough to say everything is 100% absolute. I've said it several times. Like, I could meet somebody today, go get a slice of pizza, and all of a sudden, bang, there's wifey, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm love struck, and it turns into this magical thing.
Hey, I
That
expect a phone call, by the way, if that happens.
you'd be my best man. So there are no absolutes. Everything I'm saying, there's an exception to everything. You guys are the exception to everything I'm saying. I'm looking right at the exception. You guys are making it happen. Obviously, some struggles, some fights along the way. That's again, that's the thing called life. You guys are mature enough and have been blessed with mature enough women in your life that you can figure it out or try to, or go through the lumps that life is going to give and get back up together. I feel for every one of you guys, there's too many. Like, you need two to tango. You need two to be in the mindset of one. And somewhere down that line, whether it's the guy or the girl, that's a hard thing to ask. Nowadays, I mean, it's always been hard, but I just feel like nowadays it's the what have you done for me lately? What can you provide? Where I'm not trying to grow with you. I'm just trying to start this thing from the penthouse and continue to be in the penthouse. There is no from the ground floor, and we're going to build together. You almost have to go into a date with a resume. Forget the things that I can provide for you on a level of comfort, mental comfort. Forget things I can provide for you that's not tangible. Well, what can you tangibly give me? Well, I mean, it's life. I'm struggling, hopefully I'm trying to build. I have ambition. I have this. Nah, come see me when that falls through. Like, let me know when that comes to fruition, and then come see me, and then we'll talk about it. There's too many things that don't make what a relationship should be about. It's not about growing anymore. To me, it's not about building. It's not about the communication. It's not about taking the lumps that life is going to give you together and building. In life, people want to just fight or flight. People are just out. People are just tapping out on the first sign of adversity. And then when you add another person to that equation into this thing called marriage and this thing called a relationship, it's hard, man. And I've seen more fails than I have successes.
And
And
it
that's
seems, oh, sorry, not to cut you
no,
off.
no, no, no. I
It
was pretty much done.
it seems like you have exactly what you're looking for. You're just waiting to find it.
That's a fair
Because
statement.
everything you just said was like, no one's doing this, and this. So if someone comes along that is about doing this, and this, I think it would at least hit something in your mind and be like, man, like we may be able to have a functional relationship because we both
Yes.
have the same mindset.
And
So
and at
yeah,
that point, I would just have to get on my own way. Because
right.
again, I own my stuff, man. I'm not perfect, never claimed to be. And I do have my own personal experiences that have given me baggage. Probably baggage I should have let go a long time ago, but it's there and I acknowledge it. So if I do meet that right person, I have to now get through my own stuff to make it happen. Because with my previous example, I was the cause of my last one that didn't work out. And that was probably the person that I was looking for, and that was going, if you would do this. But my own BS caused that to not work out. And that's it's a hard pill to swallow when you're the reason. All my other examples of all the fails I've had have been, oh, that person was this, that person was this person treated me like this. And again, I own my stuff. So I'll say when it was on me. The last one that was on me, that's a hard pill to swallow, my friends. When you're like, oh, I found it, but I messed it up. That makes you not want to even go near the stove. I use the microwave.
I hear you.
Hands on TV dinners.
Yeah.
Um, let me ask you. So, family is super important to you, right? And I
Yes.
feel that um, that's one of the things that actually sparked my wife and I's interest is just how we talked about family before we were even together. Um, Family's important. Have you ever seen yourself starting a family? Um, and that's kind of a piggyback off of like, would you ever see yourself in a relationship slash marriage? That, and you're obviously you're not there right now, but like, is that something that you've put away? Like being a father and having a family because of like circumstances. And I know you said you leave everything open, but I don't know that I see your passion with the love of your family, in the time that we've talked. So it's like, how do you move? Do you even want to have a family of your own type of deal when you have that passion for family, which generally would mean, from what I've gathered with you, would be, you know, getting married, having a child type of deal.
So people that have seen me around kids all say the same thing. Why don't you have any kids? You're so great around kids. And I love kids. Kids are a way to make life a little better. You can mold this little person into something that's better than you. Uh my nephew, I considered him the closest thing I've ever had to a kid. Like that's almost like my son is my nephew. And on Father's Day, he made my heart melt, man. On Father's Day, he was like, "Happy Father's Day." And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't have any kids, but thank you." And he was like, "Well, you don't need it to be a father figure like you are to me." So that that warmed my heart. Yeah, yeah, like
That's
that.
listen, yo, you can't go past that on this show, yo. That is amazing. Like that tugs at my heartstrings for sure. Like
That
that's amazing.
that made my week, man. Like to hear that, knowing you have an influence on somebody you care about, and they're still, he's 19 now, but still in that growing phase of it all. You have a chance to help this person in their life that you love. And when he grew up, I was still living with my parents. My sister lived there too. So I helped raise this since he was like a little infant, holding up little Simba. That was me. And to see the influence you have over somebody, and you're pointing it in a positive direction, and to have him acknowledge that the way he did. Would I want a family? Yes, because I feel like I have the temperament, I have the patience, I have the things to be a good father. However, where everything is now, and me being as old as I am, I don't have a biological clock, but there is a window of opportunity that's closing. So will I ever get there? No, I don't. I wouldn't want to put anybody, potential wife, baby's mother, whatever, or a kid in a bad situation based off my greed to just bring somebody into this world because I want a kid. And I feel like that's also a detriment to family. And then Brian, you said that earlier. Like I'm a certain age, all my friends are getting married. I have to now make this happen because that's what life is dictating that has to happen. And people get in that that's a trap that people fall into. And I refuse to fall into that trap, even if it's at the cost of something that I think I would want.
That's good, man. Hey, we do need to wrap up soon, but I want to give you the opportunity to, say anything you want to say, plug your socials. I mean, we said quite a bit, but even if Paul has any other questions.
I'm good.
All right, cool.
I'm good. Don't ever come back again because you just stay single.
No, man, it was such a good conversation, man. Like I'm not mad at you for anything that you said today, to be honest. You know, it's a matter of perspective. And I think we landed in a good place where, you know, I don't even think I thought we were gonna get there, but just to hear you say, like, hey, it's not completely off the table, right? It's just here's what I've experienced. I haven't necessarily seen a completely successful marriage, I guess is kind of what you said, because you said your parents had split up for a time, right? But I feel like we also said that in the podcast. Like, well, we didn't define it, but I'm thinking to myself, like, how do you define a successful marriage, right? It's if they split apart but got back together and they're still married, like that was just a hiccup in the long run. You know what I mean? So it it takes all types, and there are all types. You know what I mean? So it's in my mind, it's a choice of whether or not you want to put in the work. And that's with all things in life, right? If you want to be successful in your job, you have to decide to put in the work. If you want to earn a certain amount of money, you have to decide to get qualified and put in the work to earn that money. You know, if are a kid and want to be better at football, right? You have to decide to go to practice and maybe even practice on your own sometimes. So that's my perspective on it, you know, and that's what's working for me currently.
I've learned to never leave all doors closed just because you never know. This thing called life is funny, man. So you just give yourself the opportunity to give yourself a yes or no answer. Don't just close off everything for the sake of it because you might miss something good.
Facts. So as we're closing, I want to take another opportunity to invite everybody to meet us on our socials. Searching Marriage is Tougher across all of them. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. And if you want to continue the conversation on any of our episodes, please do that there. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can make sure that you hit us up on our website, marriagestuffer.com. There's a form for you to fill out. You can let us know any topics that you want to talk about, or again, like I said, just apply to be a guest, which there is no cost to. We will talk to you a little bit beforehand and let you know if we'd like you to be on the show, which I'm gonna tell you right now, it's probably a yes. So if there is anything that you guys are thinking out there that you want to talk about, please reach out to us. This is a community. And as I've said before on the show, this is a take action community. All right. So if you're looking just to get coached up, hit us up. If you have some ideas that you'd like to share, hit us up. And I mean, that's all I got, man. Let's go get this, man. I get hyped every time I walk out of this room, like just feeling better prepared to go and tackle my marriage, man. So I hope that y'all get that.
Appreciate you guys having me, man. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
definitely appreciate it for sure.